Hello and welcome to the Diversity Show brought to you by the East Hampton Town Anti-Bias Task Force. My name is Andrew Visconti and I am your host today. Our guest today is Carlos Lama. But before we introduce Carlos, with a diversity show, we try to bring to you the diversity that exists within our community in East Hampton. Diversity can mean many different things. It could be cultural diversity, it could be racial diversity, it could be just what we do with our lives and how diverse we can be from one another and yet hopefully get along well. Carlos is someone that I have known for a while but never had the opportunity to have the kind of conversation that we're going to have today. Carlos, as you can see, is on a wheelchair, and that is part of a conversation I would like to have in a few minutes. First, let's find out more about Carlos, and after that, I really would like to get to ask the questions that many of us often have but feel uncomfortable asking. What is life like on a wheelchair? But before we get there, Carlos.
Yes.
So a little biographical background. You were raised in Texas, I think, of a
Mostly.
Peruvian family.
Yes.
Where shall we start? Shall we start with Peru or shall we start with Texas?
Well, it always goes back to Texas. Texas is my home state. I was born there. My parents met in college in Dallas. My father was Peruvian. He moved up here to go to college and met my mother, who was a small town East Texas gal who just wanted to get the heck out. And then I came along and my sister came along and we moved around quite a bit, I think, about every 3 years. Texas was, yeah?
Yeah, no, but before we start moving
Yes,
around,
yes.
let's go back to Peru for a little
Sure.
a moment. What part of the Peruvian culture was part of the family?
Well, my family is from a city in the north called Piura, which is also a state. It's coastal, very dry and arid. But they were a very aristocratic family. I have photos dating back to the 20s of all of my relatives. There's always been a beach house that was a sort of center of activity for cousins, aunts, uncles.
East Hampton meets Peru.
East Hampton meets Peru. There are a number of Peruvians here. In fact, just recently there was a Peruvian festival here in East Hampton. So that's always been a very strong cultural imprint on me. In fact, we moved back to Peru after my sister was born, and I lived there up until the age of probably 4. And so that language is also imprinted upon me, even though when we moved back to the States, more or less, when I was that age, it was all English because English was spoken in the home. My father was fluent in English, although my mother spoke Spanish. It wasn't practical, but I try and practice as much as I can.
How many times have you been to Peru?
Well, not many since my adult life. Let's see, I can count 4 times maybe. I went in 1976 and 1987, 7, in 2008, and just recently last year for a family reunion with my daughters.
I was in Peru a long time ago, so I definitely don't know Peru. But for those of us who have never been to Peru, have only spent a little time, how can you capture your experience or Peru the way you experienced it?
Well, it's very interesting place, completely different than the United States. Everything really revolves economically around Lima, the capital. I mean, you have limeños, people from Lima, and then you have kind of everybody else, more or less. But culturally, everyone talks about Peruvian food, as being like the best of different countries in South America, although Argentinians, Brazilians, everyone will argue that, but everyone says Peruvian food is some of the best in the world, and I have to agree. Um, there's the history of the Incas, of the Quechua Indians, up and down the Andes. I've been to Cusco and Machu Picchu twice in my life, and that was phenomenal, and I would encourage anyone who can go to go.
Despite the altitude?
Despite the altitude, I mean, you don't know until you get there, and you get off the plane and they give you coca tea, and that's, you just got to go slow.
I remember that.
When I was 11, we were in Cusco. I was running in the train station to catch up with my parents, and it took me 20 minutes just to get my breath back because of the altitude. But yeah, those are really very strong memories I have of being there. And I have a huge extended family still. And so there's a family reunion every 2 years, and I brought my daughters last year, who are now 22 and 19, and they're just like, we're going every year, or every other year, we're going.
Before we move to the Texas
Yeah.
part, you mentioned that recently there was a Peruvian festival out here?
There was, I can't remember, I just met her, and it's a restaurant in East Hampton, a Peruvian woman, or, oh God, I'm embarrassing myself, can't remember her name. She is the manager there at this restaurant, and I guess I don't know if it's a hotel. And she has a Peruvian festival every year, and it just happened this past weekend. And when I find out, I'll tell you after the show.
Okay. So from Peru to Texas, did you say Dallas? Is that where
Well,
you?
no, that was just where my parents went to school. My mother is from a really redneck small town north of Houston called Cleveland, Texas. And I had the misfortune of going to school there several times in my life whenever we were just kind of go to reset. I think I was there in second, sixth grade, and the first 3 years of high school. So that was a different kind of education in itself. Although I love my East Texas roots, and the people in East Texas, Southern hospitality is definitely a thing.
Southern hospitality. Would you say that Texas is a southern state?
Oh yes, undoubtedly. Although Houston, where I call my home city, is a Democratic city. It had its first openly gay elected mayor when we were living there. And so in some ways it's very progressive and incredibly diverse. There are more languages spoken in Houston, I think, than any major city in the United States. And it's huge. So Houston is near and dear to my heart, but I also have issues with it. Texas.
Now, you made perhaps a distinction by saying that you are very fond of your East Texas roots,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to.
No, not West Texas, Panhandle, the Valley down in Brownsville. It's all the same. I say East Texas just because that's where I identify, just so people who are from Texas know what part of Texas I'm from.
Okay. But the reason I sort of paused for a moment when you said that it's a southern hospitality and a southern state is because to me Texas is sort of a state on its own.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and they're very proud of that, They definitely, for better or for worse, politically, they definitely set standards that I may not agree with in terms of the, politics. But and so people, I mean, I've got a belt that says State of Texas, It's just people are very proud of their Texas heritage, and I'm no different.
Do you still have family there? Do you still
Absolutely.
visit?
Oh, absolutely. I have a sister there. I have a son there. I don't know if you know, I have an older son who's about to turn 37, which is kind of crazy, but he lives in Austin. My sister lives in Houston. I have aunts, uncles, cousins, all of it. Yeah.
Okay, and then the leap from Texas to East Hampton.
Well, my wife, Andrea Grover, is originally from Long Island, and although she put down roots in Houston, where we met, we really wanted to it was time to move on, do something else. And her parents were getting a little older, so we wanted to be a bit closer to them. And we decided to move back nearer to them. Weren't sure if we were going to move we had looked at upstate New York, near Beacon, and just it didn't gel. And then she had a job opportunity at the Parish Art Museum here, and we took it and we moved to Sag Harbor 15 years ago.
For the viewers who might not be familiar with the name, Andrea Grover is the executive director of Guildhall in East Hampton. Great passion for music your entire life, right?
Yes.
And you have an amazing collection of vinyl?
Yes, I think it's amazing, but it always needs a bit of TLC. It's just kind of, if you collect records, I have 3,000 records, which, some people have many more, some people have less. It's a relative term, but they're spilling out all over the floor. The garage I've been relegated to the garage, so it's kind of my domain, my laboratory, and I just have everything. I have all the records I have some of my parents' records. I have records that I bought when I was a kid in the 70s. I don't know if you remember K-Tel albums. There were these compilation, top 40 hits. I got a whole bunch of those when I was growing up. And then in the 80s, I was a club kid going out all the time. So I have a huge chunk of really bad 80s dance music that I can't let go of.
All kind of music?
For me, oh, sure. I love country and western. I love world music, from all kinds of different cultures. I love weird experimental electronic music, obscure rock music. There's, prog rock. There's something called, it's not a derogatory term, it's called Krautrock. It's German rock music from about the late 60s to the late 70s. I got a whole bunch of weird stuff.
Is there a kind of music that you don't particularly care for?
Well, I used to say that I don't care for contemporary country music. However, because I've been hosting karaoke weekly for the last year and a half, when people get up on the mic and they're passionate about it, I can go with that. So I couldn't name you anything or much, but I just try not to have much judgment at all in terms of what people listen to. If it makes them happy, who am I?
Is Peruvian music part of your repertoire?
Oh yes, oh yes. There is a specific type of cumbia music made in Peru from the 60s and 70s, primarily some of the 80s. It's sort of like psychedelic cumbia. The term is chichas. Chicha is actually a drink in Peru, but it's also been taken over as a moniker for a type of music that's really good. My favorite band is called Los Destellos.
What does it mean?
I don't know what Destellos is. I should look that up in terms of the meaning. I just know the name is Los Destellos. And it was I have just many compilations of that. It's mostly instrumental, but really good.
So music is not only your passion, but your career.
It has morphed into that. I've worn many hats over the years. I did go to school for audio engineering, and so I love the occasion to run live sound, especially like if it's a small event or a singer-songwriter sort of situation. But and I've had radio shows on different, radio stations wherever I've lived. The last one being Stony Brook University here. But I worked as an arts educator for many years in Houston at the Contemporary Arts Museum. I worked in corporate America when I lived in New York City in the 90s, working for Seagram, the beverage company. So I've done a bit. But right now, DJing is the most lucrative thing, and actually running karaoke is the most satisfying thing.
Sounds like fun.
It's a
So
lot of fun.
now, if you don't mind, I would like to go back to the topic that I introduced at the beginning of the show.
Yeah.
Life on a wheelchair. Usually, I don't know, obviously you know better than me, what is the reaction of people when they meet a youngish person on a wheelchair, but we always feel very uncomfortable. We can't ask questions. It's not polite. It's
Well, I think that's the old paradigm, for viewing people with disability. I don't think, and I don't really run into that problem so much, I think, because I, consciously or not, try to be very personable and, look people in the face, look them in the eyes, engage with them, listen to them, that sort of thing. Ask them questions, kind of find, a little avenue to talk. And it doesn't really become an issue. It has in the past, but I realize it's really about me. It's about their perception and what they're comfortable with. I mean, the one thing I'll say is I do love it when people do ask questions, especially children. I love kids. Kids are great. They just have no filter and they're like, why are you doing that? Why are you moving in this thing?
what is one question that a child asked you, if perhaps it comes back to mind, that sort of surprised you or charmed you or
Do you sleep in your wheelchair? That was a good one, or, also, a wheelchair is just a tool. It's a vehicle for mobility. I spend most of my waking hours using a wheelchair, but not all of them. If I go to a theater, I get out of it and like to sit in a chair. Sometimes, rarely, if I'm going to dinner, I'll, uh, get out of it. Certainly, I don't take a bath in my wheelchair. You know, so um, but people do. I had a weird experience recently. I was in physical therapy and was overhearing a woman next to me talking about her issues, and she just didn't want to end up like one of those people in a wheelchair. She was so completely unaware of her surroundings and who was with her. And I just said, a wheelchair, like I told you, it's a tool to be used for mobility, no different than a cane or a walker or an orthotic insert in your shoe or your shoes. It's just, you know, that's what I use. That's what it is.
I suppose most of us are familiar with wheelchair accessible facilities, bathrooms, restaurants, whatever.
Mhm.
Uh, how user friendly is East Hampton in terms of being on a
Um,
wheelchair?
it's okay. I mean, there have been some restaurants that there isn't access, or they say, "Oh yeah, you can get in this one," and you get in the bathroom and you realize the stalls, are this wide. Um, but there are workarounds. Uh, you just bring it to their attention, or sometimes you'll go and there is the wheelchair accessible bathroom, but they've got a whole bunch of chairs stacked in front of it or something. And you just bring it. I have no fear of calling it out and saying, can you move these now, please? Or also I can become a little militant about parking spaces too. I've been known to embarrass my children. They're like, Dad, don't, Dad. I'm like, well, look, if I don't, who will? Are you going to? So I don't have a problem with that. I should tell you though, I did, the reason I use a wheelchair is I was in a car accident when I was 23 years old as a passenger. Um, and I broke my back, my spine, several fractures in my cervical spine, but it was at the thoracic at T4. So everything was markedly different after that. And I spent about 3 or 4 months in rehab. Uh, and it was there were dark times for sure immediately afterwards. However, it happened en route between Texas and New York. And it was in North Carolina. And within 2 days, I had 10 friends at my bedside. So I was very lucky to have a very strong support network of friends and family to take care of me. And many times that makes the difference between someone's, success and recovering. You know,
Carlos, I cannot even imagine what it is like from one moment to the next to have your life, your mobility,
yeah, your world.
your world completely changed. I cannot imagine. As much as I want to be empathic, I cannot go there.
No,
Can you?
and that's okay.
No,
I mean, I couldn't before it happened, and then it happened, and then I was going through it. I mean, I woke up, more or less came to when I was in ICU, but I knew immediately what had happened just by listening to people and hearing people. But I never, they said you'll never walk again, all of this, and I didn't really, I was like, okay, well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I am lucky. I consider myself lucky, actually, in that one, I still am able to use my hands for the most part, my arms. My break was not a complete break. It was afterwards considered partial. I can stand up. There was a time when I actually walked with forearm crutches when I was younger and much more, much braver, but now I don't want to fall, so I don't do that anymore. Um, so, but it's a relative term. Even if I was a quadriplegic, it wouldn't mean that I would be less of a person. Just because I use a wheelchair and you don't doesn't make you a better person than me. Just because I can use my hands and someone else can't doesn't make me a better person than them. So what it's like, I don't know. I mean, this is my life. It's like asking someone what it's like to be a parent, what it's like to be a woman, what it's like to be, you know, this is the skin that I live in. This is the only experience I know.
Does it define you?
I used to say no, but certainly it does. It affects me, and so by default, I think it defines me. But I've never chosen my friends based on their disability, just I've never chosen my friends based on their skin color. It's mostly about shared interests and culture. And, I'm interested in people. When I get into a cab or an Uber, the first thing I ask is, where are you from? And what music do you listen to? And that starts the conversation. And then people just open up. They just open up. And then you have a common language.
Have you ever discovered a particular kind of music just by asking that kind of question to a cab driver?
All the time. All the time. People from wherever. Well, if you get into a car with a Nigerian person, all you have to say is Fela Kuti. Fela Kuti is, the most famous Afrobeat musician. And then it just starts from there. It's like, oh, do you listen to his children's music? But yeah, anywhere from like Morocco or any number of countries.
We associate music with rhythm. Rhythm, for some reason, travels to our body and we feel like moving to the rhythm. You're a dancer. You love to dance. Do you still dance?
In my head, I bounce. I have fun in DJing. I dancing, I guess, in the sense of moving your whole body. I don't dance like I used to. I used to, go to clubs every week of my life. And then that drastically changed. So I really had to redefine myself and what, I guess, go to the things that still gave me pleasure. And so, yeah, I guess I still, I groove. I'll say that. Because I think I still have the old paradigm of dancing is, moving your whole body. Although I will tell you, when I lived in the city in the 90s, I did participate in a couple of contact improv workshops that were for able-bodied and disabled people. And those were transformative for me. So, yeah, I dance.
You used to be a kid who used to go to Studio 54, Danceteria.
Yes.
So you really lived New York in the
Well, in the 80s, I had a brief, I mean, I only started going to clubs from 82 to 87, but what made it, I made a pilgrimage to New York. I was too late for Studio 54. I wish I would have been there, but all I could do was look at, photos of Studio 54 and say, whatever's going on there, I have to go there, but then it ended. But it was Danceteria, it was all these other clubs, Area, The World, Palladium, Pyramid Club, all these legendary New York clubs. And anytime I made a trip to New York, I made it a point. Even London, when I went to Europe in '85, and went to every club I could when I was there.
I have a final question about DJing.
Mm-hmm.
What makes a good DJ?
Reading the crowd. Yeah.
What does that mean?
Well, you look at the people who are there and you think, I think they like this kind of music, or I know they like this kind of music, or you play something and it sparks someone, you're like, I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna explore this further, or if they like that, I'm gonna tweak it a little and see if they'll like this, and it's just kind of an ongoing conversation.
But I understand that many DJs don't take requests from the audience, and you do.
I do.
And how is that different?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak for people who don't take requests. I mean, I'm there. I'm an entertainer. I'm there to entertain. I'm not there to, this is me and this is what I do, and if you don't like it, tough. I mean, maybe a little bit, but I mean, I want to educate people. I want to turn them on to new experiences, new music. There's nothing better than playing a record or playing some records and people coming up and saying, what is that? And you're like, this is the record, put it in your hands, read the cover, and educate yourself,
Well, speaking of educating people, I thank you so much for this conversation. I learned a lot.
Thank you.
About you, your passions, your life. Thank you very much for being here
Thank
today.
you, Andrew.